prepping to live stream the meeting. Great.
You're gonna have to actually.
Oh,
Oh,
what?
that's fine. Close it.
Okay, just close
I think
it.
it's fine.
We're good, right?
Okay. Yeah, go to the Zoom.
All right.
See if it says live stream. Yep.
Okay, great.
Say okay there. And I
It's
think we're
okay.
good.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, I'll call to order a meeting of the Planning Commission for a work session on January 23rd, 2024.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. For planning staff updates, I typically don't sit in this role. So as you guys know, Erica Palmer is now the Community Development Director for the city of Troutdale. So she started this week, so I'm very happy for her. And if you guys need her contact information, I can definitely share it with you. So she's doing really well. In this role, then I am just doing this intro. We've actually posted the planning manager position out, I believe, a week and a half ago or so. And it goes into the first week of February. So hopefully we'll have lots of great candidates, so then they can step in regards to being the planning manager. The other update that I have is that I know that you all now have county email address, no,
City.
sorry.
City.
I have to work for the county. City email addresses. But now there is a
Factor.
two-factor authentication. So Eric offline after this meeting will gather information that's needed so that you guys can get your emails working. We were a little frantic, or I was a little frantic this morning. I haven't heard from anybody. Is anybody coming today? So luckily, we are so thankful that all of you guys made it and we can actually have this work session.
Yeah, I guess just, so everyone should have a city email account and it would be the preference, just for record keeping and things like that, for any communication to go through that city email. If you guys have a preference to also be copied on your personal, we can do that as well. Let us know. We can get into the details after the meeting. I don't want to get into it now. Just be aware that if it's very unlikely, but if there's a public records request, something like that, then your personal email and potentially that conversation is going to show up. So that's why we prefer it to go through the city email. So it's just really clean. Here's all the city communication. Your personal stuff is just out of it. So that's what we'd recommend.
I would highly suggest that just because I've had colleagues under litigation with records requests, and they were utilizing their own personal laptop and phone, and those were subpoenaed to be part of the record.
So what that means is a lawyer probably has to go through it and make through all your emails and pull out, what's actually applicable. And so just to avoid any of that, we recommend, it's a little bit more of a hassle to check another email, I know, but just in the long run, I think it's the smarter thing to do. So.
All right, that's all I have in regards to updates.
Are you here for the Planning Commission meeting? Yes, is it? Have a seat.
Thank you.
I have a few, Joy, if you don't.
Oh, okay.
Hey, come on, take a seat anywhere. Thanks.
Thank you.
A few other, I guess, really development related updates and civic projects, pedestrian bridge. You guys approved that as part of the TSP, a small TSP update. The city awarded a contract for construction. So, and Dan, please chime in here as city councilor as well, if you'd like to. We should start that project probably next month is when you'll start to see fencing and general construction stuff going up, and then full-blown construction this summer, and it should be finished in 2025, early 2025. I think there's some things that are out of our control, power lines that need to be moved and stuff like that. So that would be any of the delays, but we're moving ahead. Contract's been issued and you're going to start seeing construction soon.
Within this next, for me, the contractor, we should get a more definite timeline for that's when would be the groundbreaking as well.
Yep. Now to make ready, work has been started with the right of way for power lines, stuff like that. That'll be the first step.
No, we're going to start with the surface levels, erosion control and things like that. I guess my point in saying there's other work that we're gonna need ODOT to do, we're gonna need PGE to do, and we don't control their schedule. So I guess just if things, we don't have control over that. So we're planning to finish in early 2025, but if we don't, it's probably not gonna be because of us, is what I'm saying. Other updates, I'm sure you all see it up on the hill, Sherwood Commerce Center by Schnitzer Properties off Oregon Street. Planning Commission approved that in 2021, I believe, is when you guys actually approved that. They're getting close to occupancy. You can see all the buildings are up. Probably this spring or early summer is when they'll get occupancy. So just great to see that project in, very aligned with council goals related to economic development, job growth. We'll have if things continue to move forward, we'll have another fairly large industrial project by Panattoni Development. They'll be coming in February probably for land use approval. So it's a pretty large industrial building, about 400,000 square feet. So that'll be coming to you guys. One of the council goals that we recently checked off, if you will, is to produce an annual report on housing. And so we just did the 2022 year, and we're going to update calendar year 2023 as well. And so I think it's just a really good idea to share that with Planning Commission as well. Basically a summary of all the housing production and permits in the city over that calendar year. We built a lot of single family in 2022 and not much else is basically what it shows. And you can get into the numbers and stuff like that. So when we talk about Sherwood West and middle housing and trying to get housing at different price points. Sorry, Tyler, talked to you as well. I forgot you were there. Policy can influence the type of housing that we actually get in the end. And that's a city council decision, whether and with recommendation from you guys as to whether or not we actually want to require other types of housing other than single family. And so I think that gets into it paints a pretty clear picture. This report does what we actually get if we're not actually requiring other types of housing in the code.
On that, so as far as like the amount of, or predominantly being single family housing, was that primarily due to developer interest, or did that have more to do with just what we had zoned available?
It's a good question. So most of the housing is coming in the Brookman addition, right? It's the big Middlebrook subdivision and a few others around there. So if you recall, we did the middle housing code update. So when those developers come in for building permits, they can, if they want to, do duplexes, triplexes, as long as the lot size is big enough. So these are about 5,000 roughly, so they could probably get a duplex, maybe a triplex on there. But so it's kind of up to the developer. So the code right now allows middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, and up. Developers are putting in single family because it also allows single family. So the question for Sherwood West, and we don't need to get into this now, we'll get into it after we get a yes from Metro. Does the city want to require a developer to come in and put in a duplex or a triplex or something else other than single family? So that's the policy question. Right now in Sherwood West, we do have middle housing only zones. And so at least in some areas right now, it would be middle housing only, and other areas would be single family. So that's the update. Any questions on that? We get into the agenda items. All right.
We have to share your screen? No?
Yeah, I think we do actually.
Click on the time there. Yeah.
Full screen.
It's Adobe, I think it's Control-L.
Hey, someone in tech here. Or not.
Or the arrow to the right.
To the right?
To the right.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Perfect. Cool. All right, so first agenda item is Sherwood West update. So it's going to be a fairly high level update, and we're hoping to bring back a more refined update next month, actually. So as you recall, Planning Commission made a recommendation to City Council this summer. So I'll just give an update on where we've been since then. Talk about the Metro urban growth process, urban growth management decision process. Talk about the very sort of detailed next steps, and then get into any questions and discussion. So since you guys recommended approval to the planning commission in the summer, planning commission or city council did accept the plan. It wasn't a ordinance or anything like that, but they accepted it is what's required by Metro. So they didn't make any changes to the plan. They accepted it per your recommendation. Just a really quick summary: 1,300 acres, a lot of different land uses, housing, schools, mixed employment, hospitality zone in the south. So they blessed it as recommended by Planning Commission. We did quite a bit of work sessions to get to that so they accepted it in July. And then since then, we did a whole bunch of work sessions with city council on basically whether to actually take the next step and actually apply to Metro for the urban growth boundary expansion. So city council just made that call in January, actually this month. They made that call to, yes, submit an application and submit an application for the entire planning area. I think that was a big question for council about should we ask for the whole thing, or should we ask for part of it and ask for the next part in future cycles. So
Those windows for asking Metro or what, every 2 years, 6 years?
6 years with a mid-cycle for residential. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I think that was
What would be the benefit of doing like partial versus the whole ask?
what would be the benefit of a partial?
Or like what would be the reason?
When you're bringing in the whole area, then, and you actually do a concept plan, have Metro bless it, then you have the opportunity in the future to update that plan, but you don't have the opportunity to go through the whole process, I get. And so I guess you could ask for part of it, leave some of it out, and then really have, I guess, a fresh start with Metro in the next, 6 years. So it was basically just, do we want to do the whole thing or not, or should we wait on part of this? And so we talked a lot about the pros and cons, and I think what staff actually put forward was a lot of, it makes sense to do the whole thing for various different reasons. Infrastructure financing was the really big one. If we leave out, because we also had to look, if we were doing a partial ask, we had to look at what would actually be left out. And we did the whole concept plan, and it works as a whole. We know that. And when you started taking things out, it left some questions unanswered about, is the financing going to work? Is the phasing going to work? What are we actually going to take out? And I think that was a big piece as well. We know we want this mixed employment zone up here. We know we want the hospitality around here. We certainly don't want to leave the high school hanging by itself. And so it became a really tough question about what we'd actually pull out. And so for a lot of different reasons, everything kind of went in the direction of, it makes sense to ask for the whole thing. And I think the other really important consideration was, I think it's on here, we talked about annexation policy really a lot. And I think that gives the city some assurances about how fast we grow, ensuring we get adequate public infrastructure. Right now, we really don't have, I'd say, strong annexation policy, but we're probably going to move towards that. And so before a property owner can actually come into the city, we're likely going to do an annexation agreement with that property owner. And we're going to get into a little bit of the details of transportation, infrastructure, sewer capacity, all that sort of stuff before we get a land use application. I think that'll help get the city some assurances that we're looking for in terms of public infrastructure, make sure there's no safety issues or deficits to the public system. It's really, so we also provided that cover, if you will, to council that, hey, we can likely phase this thing in a way that makes sure we don't get left hanging in any way or left in a tough spot.
Quick question for you. Do properties have to be annexed before they're zoned? And then to what extent is the city beholden to the zoning and the concept plan?
Good question. So upon annex, so we're on it's called a one map system, not to get into details of that, but let's say Metro says yes. We will, before anybody can annex, the city will set the zoning. And the property owner, when they annex, that will be applied automatically unless they do a concurrent zone change. So they'd have to do a concurrent zone change for annexation. Yes, with the annexation application. So that's all up to, I mean, it would come to you guys as planning commission and then to city council if they were doing a zone change.
My second question was, are we beholden to the concept plan to do the zoning?
I'd say not in detail. Roughly, it's a concept plan, and so Metro may put conditions on our approval. If they say yes, they may say, okay, your concept plan assumes 3,000 houses, therefore you need to hit 3,000 houses. And so, but whether we put it here or there, that's flexible. But big picture, we got to stick to what we said we're going to do.
The details of it is gonna be through the comprehensive plan. It's the whole process, multi-year.
We got about at least 2 years. So let's say Metro says yes to us at the end of this year, we probably have 2 years of comprehensive planning. And then a developer could come in with an annexation application at minimum 2 years, minimum. We also talked a lot about master planning, and this was another big piece for council. Council would like us, there was consensus on council to do master planning for basically all portions of Sherwood West that are not this mixed employment zone. What do we mean by master planning? A more detailed plan than just the comprehensive plan and the zoning map. Comprehensive plan, we have really broad policies. The zoning map has general densities and things like that. And then we have the development code that talks about setbacks and other things like that. But exactly where's the park going to go? Exactly where's the trail going to go? How's it going to connect? Taking into account natural resources, the vision for the area, putting it down in more detail, stamping that. And then really what it does is it helps as each owner comes in for development, we have a plan that we know we can stick to. And so if there's a trail that we're envisioning, it's going to be much harder for a property owner, a developer to say, yeah, the trail can go over there. Don't worry, it could go over there. We know the trail goes here. And so, through land use approval, the trail is going to go through there. So that we make sure we have a complete community or whatever our vision is for that master plan that we can actually implement it. So they were really pretty firm on doing master planning for basically anything that had residential in it. And we want to provide a little bit more flexibility for the mixed employment zone in the north, but everywhere else we're looking at a master plan. Villebois, really good example of a master plan community around here. Basically Wilsonville is doing master plans everywhere. Frog Pond, they do a comp plan and then they're doing a master plan. And so we probably follow a pretty similar approach to that. And so that was kind of the work sessions with council. We got into a lot of detail about what this is going to look like in the future. And then at the end of that, they directed us to submit a letter of interest to Metro for the entire urban reserve area. So we submitted that letter of interest, and I'll get into the details of the next steps in just a second. We have also been doing a concept plan refinement study, and this is somewhat new to Planning Commission. I want to be really clear, this is not changing land uses, it's not changing the transportation system, it's not changing really any of the fundamental elements of the concept plan. The purpose of the refinement study is to first look at this North District area. That was really the impetus for the whole study, and it grew a little bit. But we want to bring jobs to Sherwood. And so the purpose of the study, the main purpose was to really drill down into that North District and figure out what infrastructure do we need to serve that area, and what are the costs actually going to be in a little bit more detail than the concept plan currently had. The other thing we looked at is, and we're trying to make a really strong argument to Metro about readiness and, you know, make the case for why they should say yes. And so we're looking at, you know, what are our natural advantages, if you will, for jobs and industry in this area. And so, you know, Washington County, big microchip manufacturer, not to spoil what it's probably going to say, but we want to be really clear about what our intent is for this mixed employment, you know, area, and say, hey, here's our vision. It can be successful for these reasons. So that's the North District refinement study. We're also looking at cost estimates for regional parks and trails. We just include that in the original concept plan. How much are the parks going to cost? Regional, big, not local parks. How much are the regional parks and trails going to cost? And then we got some comments kind of later in the process for our, it would really be our revenue projections. So we're correcting some of that. Council also wanted us to look at the Highway 99 pedestrian bridge, the undercrossing at Cedar Creek, a separate grade separated crossing of Highway 99 at Cedar Creek, and then the Brookman sewer trunk line. All of those are outside the Sherwood West boundary. And so we didn't include them in the plan. But when I went to City Council, they said, hey, can we include these costs? Because they're going to serve Sherwood West. They're more regional pieces of infrastructure. The Brookman line will actually directly serve Sherwood West development. And so City Council directed us basically to update the cost estimates and include those infrastructure costs in the cost projections for the concept plan area. So what's going to happen is the costs are going to go up. I think that in my opinion, that's actually a good thing. We're providing a clearer picture of what it's really going to cost to serve this area. We had a pretty significant surplus for transportation funding specifically. I'll just say it was like $80 million of surplus for transportation funding. And frankly, I think our council had some concern, rightly so, our council had some concern about that. We just know, and speaking from experience, it is very difficult to fund transportation projects. And it's really expensive. And usually, to be honest, we don't have enough money. And we're looking at the state, we're looking at federal government, et cetera, to try and fund, especially the larger transportation infrastructure. And so council was concerned that if we had this huge surplus, it's A, maybe not all that accurate, and B, going to be really hard to advocate for ourselves for funding that we might actually need. And so we're bringing in those costs. The costs are going to go up, which I think is a more accurate picture. I think that's it for the refinement study, and I'll get into the schedule a little bit, but we're really short on time, but I'll get into the detailed schedule. Any questions on that before I move on?
Is there someone we can go to find out more on just 99W under crossing Cedar Creek, only because I was on that committee years ago for the Pomp and Torrell and all that stuff.
I can find out. I don't think we have a website, but it's a sort of a targeted project right now in the city. It's a long ways out, to be honest. You know, we need to finish the Ped Bridge, but it's basically, for if you're not familiar, it's going to be. Where would it be? It'd be right between, if you know where Camp Bow Wow is on Highway 99, reference a business. It's basically right there. So between the and it's actually right, if you guys have done the Cedar Creek Trail, the new Cedar Creek Trail, it turns right where that bridge is, the causeway is right there. That's where it would continue straight actually and go under Highway 99. And then we just keep going and connect to the wildlife refuge. So we see it as sort of a critical link in our trail system. And so that's why we're targeting it. I'll get into the schedule in just a second. And I really want to bring this stuff to you guys, basically this refinement study to you guys, and give you a work session on it before it goes to council. Our consultant is under the gun and we're putting a lot of pressure on him right now to finish the study. And so I'm hoping we can bring it on February 13th. If not, I'll be really open. It's going to go straight to city council. But that's why I started with no changes to to land uses, no changes to, trail system. It's basically the cost updates is really what this is, at the direction of city council. So, questions on any of that? In terms of the metro decision making, so they're basically fully underway with what they call the urban growth management process or urban growth management decision. It's mainly being led by metro staff, although they do bring in consultants as well. They have economists and other consultants that they use. And it's basically big picture. It's a look at the regional need for housing and employment lands over a 20-year period. And so it's a very unique system. It's unique to the Portland Metro and to Oregon. They will look at a very high level. They're going to look at, well, I'll explain it in a high level. They get into detail, but they're going to look at the supply of vacant land in the region, and then they're going to look at the demand over the next 20 years for land, and they'll reconcile that. And in the end, it'll say, yes, we need more land within the urban growth boundary over the next 20 years, or no, we don't. We have actually enough vacant land or redevelopable land within the urban growth boundary for the next 20 years. And it's a little bit, I'd say it's a little bit of an awkward process because we as the city have gone through this concept plan, which is actually required by Metro before we even apply. So we go through this process before they make a decision of whether or not more land is needed. And so, we'll do everything we can. We'll do the concept plan the right way, make sure it's a high quality plan. We're providing a lot of input into their process, but in the end that they will come out with a decision about whether or not more land is needed within the urban growth boundary. If the answer is no, they don't even have to consider our application. If the answer is yes, they'll consider it. And if we meet the need, then it would be a yes. A lot of detail in there. They're going to look at, and the city's participating in this right now. They're going to look at regional population and household growth. They're going to look at employment forecasts. They're going to look at redevelop. They're doing just to give you a little bit of detail. They're doing at a regional level. They're looking at every single tax lot and have an economist try and figure out whether or not the property is going to redevelop in the next 20 years using a rough pro forma model. You'd be very interested in this. It's what I've gotten from Metro is that it can be really difficult to look at every tax. It is almost impossible to look at every tax lot in detail. And so they're coming up with a system where they can look at, things like assessed value of the land, the actual value of the building, the cost of construction right now. All that goes into this big old model and spits out whether or not that property is likely to redevelop over the next 20 years. And yeah, that's kind of the process. And so we're providing a lot of testimony into the process right now, really trying to make sure that it's accurate, as accurate as possible. And so they're going through that now. That's the draft urban growth report. All of that's going to be released as part of the draft urban growth report this summer. And I think that's going to be pretty telling as to where this decision might land. And then in late summer, Metro's chief operating officer will make a recommendation to their board. And then in early fall, Metro Council will give direction to their COO on their recommendation. And I did miss a step, which is that in the spring of this year, we will apply for the urban growth boundary expansion. So we apply, then they finish their process, and then it goes to their COO and to their board. And then they'll make a final decision in late fall.
Is there a difference between the green areas versus the blue areas? Or are those areas all sections that are up for consideration to be brought in?
I believe that map, I just took a snip from the Metro website just as a visual. I believe what that is showing is urban reserve areas in green. No, I know what that is. Sorry. this is a map of when different areas were brought into the urban growth boundary. So everything you're seeing there is already in the urban growth boundary. And what they're showing, because you can see the high school there, just barely you can see the high school, so that's in. And so that would be the newest land brought into the urban growth boundary. And then the other colors would be like they're showing previous iterations of expansions is what they were showing. And so different colors mean different years of expansion.
My next question, I don't know if it can be answered here, but I'm just curious. So the space between Wilsonville and Tualatin is, my understanding, Sherwood School District. So as those areas develop or expand into Tualatin and or Wilsonville, do they automatically then go into those school districts, or does it stay, they stay where they were?
School districts have established boundaries.
Mhm.
And so if there was gonna be a trade-off in regards to different jurisdictions, as far as Tiger Tualatin, or say, or Wilsonville, they would have to do a boundary swap or a change. So it doesn't automatically, once a city annexes or land is put inside the city's planning area, the school district boundary doesn't automatically adjust to it. That's a totally separate process because, again, it's a school district in which they would have to do that amendment.
But I think we do, any jurisdiction who's doing planning for an urban reserve area is going to coordinate with the school district. And, we did receive this year for this application, we did receive a letter of support from the Sherwood School District. And I think we had one of their either board members or staff or a representative of the school district on the Citizens Advisory Committee for Sherwood West. And I think, what we're doing right now actually is, and I'll touch on this briefly, we're going to do an IGA with Washington County for Sherwood West. And so I think it's, everything Joy said is correct. And I'd add to that there could be negotiation as well, communication and negotiation as to which school district takes it over. If a school district, just for example, is very cash strapped and one is not, it may make sense to change the boundary. So there should be, if everyone's doing things right, there should be planning with the school, district to
So it's
figure
not
out.
automatic, but it should be part of the process as stands.
Yes, but I think it would go towards where it's at right now, of course, right? Unless and actually, I mean, I don't mind saying it, that I believe the school board was opposed in our 2018 urban growth boundary expansion. And so they were, having issues with school capacity actually, and they were concerned about overcapacity. And so that was one of the reasons, we took that into consideration. And now they're in support. And so
I know, there was a bonding limit issue in terms of what land they had and what amount of bonds were already placed against it versus new bonds.
Mhm.
So I remember that was another primary concern.
yeah, so, I just reiterate, if the planners are doing things right and the jurisdiction is doing things right, this obviously school capacity is a critical element of whether or not you're growing or not. And so they should be included. So that's the process. We can keep you updated as things move on. The only other thing I'll add is that Sherwood is the only application this year. In 2018, there was probably 4 or 5 jurisdictions, Beaverton, Tigard, a few others that actually applied for an urban growth boundary expansion. We are the only city right now, so I call us the only child. We're the metro only child with the urban growth boundary expansion. So to be honest, there's a lot of eyes on, what we're doing right now, and the whole, it's really interesting to me, fascinating to me as a planner to go through the process, because we're going through this whole regional process. But really, we have the skin in the game, if you will. And of course, the region does too, but we have the most skin in the game. And so we're tracking it really closely. And then in terms of the upcoming schedule, so January 31st, later this month, we'll get didn't mention that the refinement study does have a technical advisory committee. So we have Washington County, Metro, we have a full spectrum of staff from all those agencies on the technical advisory committee for the cost estimates. We'll get that final report on January 31st. If I can squeeze in a work session with you guys on February 13th, I'm gonna do that. City council work session is scheduled for February 20th, the next week. On February 27th, we're going to the Washington County Board of Commissioners. Joy and I will go there, do a work session with them and present the plan. On March 5th of this year, we'll propose a resolution to city council to actually accept the updated concept plan and also do an IGA with Washington County. And then on April 2nd, we'll go back to the county and get a resolution in support of the concept plan and have them bless the IGA. And then on April 5th, we will submit the full application to Metro. So it's tight, it's very tight. But I think, again, I think it's a really good thing we're doing the refinement study. It's going to give us a really good picture of that North District and get us more accurate numbers in terms of costs and revenue. And I think, you know, from a public standpoint, general public standpoint, and my take on this is I would rather, even if the costs are going up, I think it's important to be clear about that with the public, right? Here's the updated cost, especially if it's going to be more expensive. I think that's really clear. It's really important to be clear with the public and not show a big surplus if in the end we might not actually have that. And so I think this is a really good thing in terms of transparency and accuracy and all that sort of stuff. And that's my update. Happy to take any questions.
I had a question, and you may have mentioned at the beginning, I apologize if you didn't, I missed it, but so you are taking over for Erica until that position is filled for the rest of this process?
So Joy is,
Regarding,
Sherwood West, I will be the.
just regarding Sherwood, yes, yeah.
That'll be me.
I know she was running point on everything.
I will be the point on Sherwood West. Yep.
You can check if Tyler has some questions.
Tyler, any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. That's good.
Next presentation.
Oh, oh,
I think it was,
share screen, yeah.
I put him to
To
sleep,
the
I
right.
think.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, I think it came up.
Nope.
Gotta go away, hold on.
Presentation mode,
Yeah.
it's down below.
Oh, there's one down
There's a-
below
there's
too.
more, one above the up arrow.
Yeah.
Here. Hey,
Okay, perfect. Okay,
thanks for coming.
thank you for coming. All right, so climate friendly equitable communities, that is continuing on, right? Oops. All right. The mouse is not the way to move forward. Okay, oh. So just a little bit of background in regards to why we're here. So in 2020, just a refresher, former governor Katie Brown issued order basically to help meet state goals to reduce climate pollution, right? Especially with transportation. And so it's been mandated in regards for local jurisdictions to do these updates to help with meeting those goals. So the very last time we talked about a lot of Title 16 updates. So this tonight, we're going to talk about the fair pricing options. Very specifically, and again, the fair pricing options, we're going to talk about fair pricing options and public engagements related to climate friendly equitable community or CFAX. Again, the fair pricing option, the unbundling the parking for leased commercial development and new tax revenue for commercial parking lots. Those were chosen by City Council for the parking reform regulations. And the whole goal was to try to help minimize the regulations that we're implementing. And this is the avenue of complying. And we'll talk more about it.
And to add to that, that one of the reasons why is because we're in litigation. We've talked about that. And I think, you know, certainly we can always comply with other things as we choose. But while the litigation is being processed and while we still have to comply, it would be, we don't want to be flopping in a major way with the community. And so it's like, how can we comply with this with the least impact to the community while the litigation is resolved, in case we do win, and we hope we do. And then we didn't repeal all parking and then add it back or something, do something crazy. So we're trying to get through the litigation with the least amount of impact possible.
Yep.
Can we have rollback capability?
Yes,
Yes.
that's a clear direction from council, is to
Yeah.
avoid that.
Yeah, and as far as once the ordinance, we'll create the ordinance in a way that they'll have a sunset clause or if we win litigation. Go revert back. Yeah,
Eric, I also asked earlier today, I mentioned something to Eric, that's being litigated at the level of the Supreme Court of the United States as well. I'm just curious if you talk to a city attorney. I can elaborate a little bit if you'd like, but, or you can.
I have, do we do commissioner updates at the end? Do we do that? Let's do commissioner updates and be good to
I'm
go.
wondering how it applies to this, maybe.
Well, raise it now then. Raise it
Okay,
now.
that's, yeah. So there's I don't know if you guys follow the Supreme Court news, but there was a case being litigated in front of them I think it was last week. Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. It basically has to do with, I'm not an attorney, but I'm kind of following this. It basically has to do with there's fishing companies that are being told by a state or some kind of agency, federal agency, that they have to pay for a state representative to stand on their boat and regulate their fishing practice. And for a lot of small businesses, that's untenable. So they're suing over this. And what's the reason it's gone to the Supreme Court is there is a doctrine out there called the Chevron doctrine that was said sometime in the 80s, I guess, by the Supreme Court, which basically said when there's undefined terms in the law that's passed by Congress, the state agency gets to define what it means. So the Chevron doctrine basically says that you guys at the agency are the experts, so you just define whatever you think this law is saying and go do it. And so the state agency is relying on that. Now that's being challenged. So that's what could happen is if that is overturned in June, then a lot of the kinds of things that regulating bodies, whether it's federal departments or what have you, a lot of the things they choose to do that they enact basically with the force of law under ambiguity could go away, especially if they're litigated against. It's the reason why you have, there was actually a very interesting opinion piece in the New York Times today that I thought was kind of fascinating, but it's the reason you can have major swings in policy when you have administrations go in and out. Because you could just, and it ends up getting a lot of power to the executive branch. And so undoing this arguably could return power back to legislators or make the legislators be more clear with their laws. So the reason why I thought that could apply here is this whole thing was enacted through an executive order from the executive branch. Now that's state level, so I don't know, and that's why I was curious if that does get overturned the way the Supreme Court is right now. I don't know, I'm just curious, what kind of effect would that have on states as well?
Yeah.
Or to what extent is the state relying on the Chevron doctrine in rolling this kind of thing out on its communities? Because no legislator has ever looked at this, as far as I know, not in this state.
So I didn't get a chance to talk to him today. I didn't realize it was related to CFAC. I thought it was more.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. But we can run it by the city attorney, and I mean, I'm sure he's tracking the case. He's an attorney. And so anything that's especially related to regulation, I'm sure he's going to be tracking. We also actually have lobbyists in Salem who are really good actually at tracking potential changes in legislation. And so, to be honest, it's a new request in terms of getting this, for me, getting the city attorney to sort of weigh in on it, but I think it'd be at a minimum, get on his radar for sure, the city attorney's office radar. And then if we can get just some comments about how it might apply, I'm happy to share that. Maybe we can just share it during a future staff update, send an email to you guys. But yeah, I appreciate the raising it and see what he says. Yeah, thank you.
all right. So basically two topics today, engagement and then the fair pricing options. So let's start talking about the first one, the unbundling of parking. So we've been mandated to create a program to unbundle parking for leased commercial developments. It's basically paying for parking separately from paying for the rent. Lease your purchase of the commercial unit with options not to use and pay for parking. So this is different from apartment parking, residential. So this is very specific to commercial lease spaces. So the amendments that we're proposing is going to be under a different municipal code that you guys are usually not reviewing. Is going to be under Title V Business Licenses and Regulations. We're adding to that Chapter 5.34 Non-Residential Landlord Tenant Code. The specific language, it's here on the slide. It talks about parking for commercial uses, that it needs to be unbundled, and we have an exception like hotels and motels, motor vehicles, sales and services, and truck and bus yards. Just because typically, there's a higher, as far as motor vehicles and definitely truck and bus yards, cars are there all the time, and that's for their uses. But the other aspect too is that we also have to establish a market rate that's compatible, comparable to the local off-street parking. And we've right now have written it to be $150 per parking space per month. And let me tell you how we got to that number. So the DLCD, I've asked, their guiding principle was how do we determine market rate? And basically, they asked us to survey rates for off-street parking that are happening currently, but we don't have any currently, right? We don't have any parking garages at this time. And so one of the options that they suggested was, well, why don't you look at car storage rates in your area? And so I kind of just started going down along. You can see that, I have Sherwood, I have a couple of Langers, Tualatin, King City, Tigard, Lake Oswego, Beaverton, and even Newburgh. And the average cost is about $182 per space. And it could be either an indoor or an outdoor unit. So I want to caveat this that, again, a storage is different than, because the storage is used by the owner 100% of the time. The vehicle is there all the time, dedicated to that one person or one vehicle versus being able to park there for 20 minutes as a customer, right? As their clientele. We're also a suburban community, which is a little bit more unique. We're not like downtown Portland where they can get averages in regards to parking, garages and things like that. And the car storage, I don't believe is comparable in regards to the market rate. So one of the key questions I wanted to ask all of you is that, is there an amount, a rate that should be, we should define? The state basically says it can't be less than $50 per space per month. That's about it in regards to.
If I weigh in, Joy, so I think
Yes.
part of what made this analysis, if you will, difficult is kind of the issue with CFEC generally, which is that, they want us to come up with a rate for parking, but nobody, this isn't downtown Portland. And so it's not. Exactly. And so I think where Joy was alluding to, and I'll just reinforce it, I think, and I would like to get that, I think that was, this number, 150, is what we know DLCD would support, at least right now. My hunch is that we can make an argument to get it down, frankly, to $50 a month, basically the lowest that we can actually get it. And even then, you know, I'm just thinking about the impact to the business. If you have a business that, you know, by its development code requirement requires, let's say 15 stalls, right? And then each, let's just say it's standalone, for example, and it requires 15 stalls, 15 times 50, it starts to add up pretty quick, and especially 15 times 150. And if they have to do a separate lease from that, and we just want to provide as much flexibility as possible, and also get drilled down into the fact that this is a suburban community, it's not downtown Portland, all that sort of stuff. And so I think that getting it down to the lowest is probably the best approach. I think we just need to make the argument to DLCD that that's justifiable under their regulations. So I guess opening that up to you guys, that right now in the code, we have 150. I think we could probably make an argument to get it down to 50 or 75 or something like that. And I welcome your guys' feedback. We welcome.
So just quick math that I just did real fast, 182, 24/7 is about $1.08 an hour for parking. And so you figure maybe 50 hours a week. And what's the charge? It's $50 per month. So I didn't do the math right. I go back and I was doing it for a week, not for a month.
Well, so, okay, so just to be clear, the guidelines require us to determine what we think is market and put that in here.
Yes.
Well, my first reaction here is there are no comps in Sherwood on this. We have no idea
Exactly.
what that would be in Sherwood.
And that's
because
why I
we
think-
sell
Yeah.
some.
Exactly, and that's why I think we can make the argument that the minimum is a good starting point until the market tells us otherwise.
Well, the market's gonna, so developers build I think how this sounds like it's gonna work, developers build this big thing, and then they're gonna rent building spaces out to tenants, and then also separately make them rent certain
Yes.
parking spaces for their customers.
And it's not
right?
it's not
Yes.
just new development, though. It is.
Gonna be all existing
it is
development.
Existing
Sure.
commercial.
But it's gonna get, I mean, unless they make the decision to charge people to park, like with a meter, which I don't think nobody's gonna wanna go there. It's gonna get worked out. Like, I think that
Yes.
the tenant, they're just gonna renegotiate both of them to be approximately market together.
Correct.
So I mean,
Correct.
whatever, make it $50. I mean, I see those.
What's the math person here? Is there a concern that, let's say, for example, it's the parking rate per month is $300, but it's a really small tenant? I guess my concern would be that is a
Really
really,
need to go low, so we let market forces take care of it, but I understand what the guidelines.
that would be my concern, is that maybe in some cases, you can't work it that way.
Right, because the parking's too expensive, it alone would be more than the normal lease. I understand what you're saying.
What's the impact to the city in terms of either a high valuation versus a low valuation? Do we like, or is there no impact?
There is no impact. Yeah, it would be the commercial owner that would have that impact. In regards to the way that they structure the lease, it's really.
So the biggest impact gonna be to the person that's actually using the parking spot then? Or is it?
Probably the tenants.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, there may be,
Doing this in Sherwood though. Right.
right, no, this is.
Currently, no.
Not, currently not,
But
and
it's gonna be in
so,
our code.
right, and I've seen it where, certain certain parking spaces, they have, signs that says this is just for Roxy's Grill. Like for parking spots, because
Okay.
they've already paid for those parking spaces.
Sometimes it's in the lease.
Right,
Certain
right.
certifications.
I mean, I can see something like that versus the customer, doing feeding the meter.
That would be the owner would have to decide. I'm not even gonna try to rent these. I'm just gonna put meters in because it's unbundled. So I'm just gonna have this separate. I guess they could do that, but that would.
Yeah, I mean.
No,
but at
somebody
the
else would
same
go to a different
time, I
spot.
mean, I think the complication too is that typically these are all shared. you know, as far as the parking space with all the different tenants for a marketplace, there could be 100 spaces with 20 different tenants, and so each agreement would have to allocate however many parking spaces for that particular tenant.
And I don't see, oh, Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. This can be a very slippery slope, and we're trying to figure out, like a mom and pop versus a Target.
Hey, we're
And-
losing your quality, Tyler. Can you check your microphone?
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's not good. You're faded.
Bummer.
Maybe unplug it, plug it back in.
No, nothing.
Nothing.
Flashbacks to our COVID years here.
We did city council.
You can hear us fine though.
Oh, no.
Oh, he does speak sign language.
Oh, no.
What?
No audio.
We'll keep
No, I
going.
don't. I was just.
It's just, I think it's us. Yeah, I don't know. Try and fix it if you want, and then just speak up when you're ready. We can let you know if we can hear you. Forgot what I was gonna say.
Also discuss informing the landlords when this goes into effect to adjust the leases to compensate. And then so that it offsets, so that there's not an impact to any, unless they want there to be an impact. But the idea is to have it essentially, which is why I chose this as one of our options. And
Because
so
it'll
having
get worked out in
it
more
as close to the minimum as we can, will provide for any of the tenants that are even smaller that it won't be enough to affect.
And that was my response. 150 seemed high for that. I totally agree with what your concern is. But I think with no comps at all, I mean, not even in the area, you got some tired, I suppose, but.
So they're saying garages there too, though. So
yeah,
if
garages are good.
if and when we get bigger and we add more businesses and somebody like a chip manufacturer puts in a parking garage, how is that going to affect?
So a parking garage is what we're gonna be, that's another option that has been chosen also. So we're gonna be discussing that in regards to how we're gonna get revenue for that parking garage.
If they own some, maybe if they own the building. This is for leases. This is for a lease. And so basically, I think the biggest is kind of what Joy hinted at of these multi-tenant commercial spaces. Retail.
Stuff like that,
But that would be a private garage.
Right,
The
and they're
next-
not the.
it's not the same.
The next option B is for that commercial parking lot, that is a charge
Got it.
lot, which is
Okay.
a separate than this.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it's a good question. I mean, I'm thinking about like our industrial as well, and I'm trying to think whether commercial. Do we know commercial? Like, so let's just say it's a warehousing business, and so some of them are owner occupied, right? Where like Lamb buys the building. It's not that common actually, but Lamb, for example, buys the building and occupies it. They're good. But if it's like Sherwood Commerce Center, Schnitzer Properties, they hold on to the property and they're doing leases. And so I think we should clarify if it applies to what we consider industrial in the code, or if it just applies to these really traditional commercial.
Right, because the language,
Dentist and all that.
right, the very specific language in the OAR is required for parking spaces serving leased commercial developments.
I think we'd be okay on like just what we have on 12th and Sherwood Road. There's a FedEx in there and there's land research and all those things. I don't think this is gonna apply to that. I think we're talking commercial.
Right, where there is a retail component of it.
More daily visitors in and out, less of like actual employment centers. But it would apply to commercial, to me, would apply to like the Providence Health, the health clinic that we have right there. So
So is our goal to get it down to $50 or?
yes.
So I mean, so,
No, it's not our goal. It's-
Well, I guess
it's
with
a-
feedback from you guys.
well, or because we have to bill, or we have to at least account for $50 rates, no less. That's statute, that's
Yes.
the law. Okay, so The math does work.
That
though.
was
It
the
comes out to
guideline.
So if that's 24/7, 30 days a month, or 30.1, whatever. If you figure for somebody who's working 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, roughly 21 days a month, that's gonna be right about $50 to $54.
Okay. For this 182?
Yeah, we're using 182 as with the averages in the market that you found. So if this is for commercial use, 8 hour, and I was thinking the employer though. So for an employee
Right.
being there 8 hours, but if it's even less though, if someone's coming in for 2-3 hours. How many times does that parking lot turn over a day?
Or 20 minutes.
Yeah, there are 6 chats.
Oh,
Well, let's read it.
oh,
Let's read it. We're reading your chat right now, Tyler. Sliding scale may be an issue. Mom and pop versus Target, concerned about relying on meters because a consumer would just park in a non-metered spot. Keep
Yep.
going. Owners of the building would pass that cost to each tenant. That may not be equal across the pay scale. Yep. Where is the money going? That's a good, I don't.
it's not into the city. It's not, it's
Oh,
definitely.
it goes to the landlord.
It's
It goes
to
to
the
the landlord.
owner, yeah.
Who would be collecting and overseeing it? That's a really good question. I can speak to that. What about vet clinics, therapists, retail? I mean, yeah, Counselor Barnes, I think vet clinic, physical therapist, I would put that under commercial actually. And I think just backing out a little bit, the purpose of this, I think everyone understands this, but the purpose of putting a price on parking is to try and to put a price on parking and discourage it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Pay for the true cost of parking, if you will, and potentially market size our development code and developers and all that sort of stuff. So that's the intent behind this. In terms of enforcement, so the money would go to the landlord, the city would enforce a violation. And I'll just say this, the city has discretion on what we enforce.
Councilman Woodruff, can you detail your calculations really quick, just kind of.
But 182 is just round numbers, 182 divided by 30 divided
There's the
by.
180, oh, they're down there.
182 is the average of the market study she did. So then divided by 30, divided by 24 hours to get an hourly rate per month. And then apply that to whatever I was applying it to a business, so an employee being there for 8 to 10 hours. But for retail, you know, what are the retail hours? What's their occupancy? So you can probably graph all that out and figure out an average and multiply it out, which would bring it substantially lower than 150.
But
And
those are all
justify
storage units. I mean, it's kind of-
Yeah,
Then only the closest thing that you would think would be like parking at the zoo or something, you know, which has those just here buy this space for how long, but even that is different. I mean, yeah, if you took the $8 a day or whatever added up, or that could get spindy. But it's different because you're right, it's still controlled, right? And it's a recreational use, which is different than retail, and there's limited space. There's market dynamics there as well. And it's way away from here, it's nowhere near Sherwood, so I don't know, there's just not a lot of good data from which for us to base this on, well, you know.
And I think the other thing that's happening here is that there is probably much better data, even in this west side, for residential unbundling. And hey, if you're an apartment complex, I'm sure it's not uncommon in cities like Beaverton and Hillsborough for those larger developments to price parking. And here's your monthly rate, 150, 100, whatever. And so it's a lot easier there, but we didn't go that route because the city didn't go that route because we don't want we didn't want to unbundle and then have everyone opt out of paying for the parking and then everyone park on the street is what we were concerned about. And so we said, okay, we're going to do it for commercial. But now we're struggling with how to get there with commercial. But I think the important thing is that we're avoiding having this conversation with residential. So I'll just put that in there.
so, as far as,
Parking kitty.
right, more development to improve mass transit or inner, city transit options.
Have we looked at Wilsonville or similar sized cities? We can look, I mean, yeah, I'd just put this out there. And yes, you're right, the goal is to reduce emissions. Yes, by pricing, parking and vehicle trips, yes. If anyone has an example of it's kind of an industry thing though, of like, what is a parking space within a commercial lease? And I'm not privy to that type of information. I think the reason residential is easier because a lot of people rent as opposed to rent a commercial space. So, but I say if there's any examples, Tyler, if you have any, happy to look at those. I mean, like we're committed to.
Right, and a lot of
Accuracy.
local jurisdictions have either removed all of their mandates in regards to parking. So they're not going to this level that we're going through as far as options. So there are no other cities that I'm aware of that are doing the options that we're doing.
But what I recommend, it's up to, you guys will make a recommendation to city council on this, but. And I'm not an economist or anything like that, but what I recommend is starting as low as possible. And then if the data turns out, like we start hearing from tenants or whatever, this is turning out to be the market rate, we can always bump it up from there. As opposed to start high and really cause a problem for potential tenants and,
Right.
customers and that stuff right off the bat.
I think that's the good
Do
point.
we,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the parking garage at the Round in Beaverton and the parking garage at the end of the Hillsborough, TriMet line.
Mhm.
So those are they looking at pricing? Are they doing any numbers on the idea? I have an idea what their numbers are, although I understand your comment that not everyone's going our path.
Right, well, I mean, we're gonna be, the next item, we're talking about those parking garages.
Okay.
But I didn't look at parking garages on how much the monthly
Yeah,
parking
so just.
is.
This only applies when there is a lease involved with a tenant space. So you have that tenant space involved, and then the other option we chose is for what you call standalone commercial parking lots, where it's pay to park, and then you go wherever. And we'll have an update on that right now.
Right, and,
More question.
there was a question as far as, us setting the price, is this one and done? And I believe there's an option for us to re-review and increase the pricing if it needs to, but we haven't written the amendments to do that. But I know that the guide from DLCD allows that if we want to build that in. But from what I'm hearing, $50 is as a starting point.
For a new market that's never existed before.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what the state. Yeah, okay, I mean, that's the state's minimum. Okay, then we can definitely have more discussion as we move this forward. Okay, low and slow and see where it goes. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bars. Let me just, put this down. Okay, let's move on to the next thing.
With the mouse, so you
So I'm like,
back to.
I'm not.
Go, yep.
Thank you. User error. Okay. So the next option that for fair pricing talks about a new tax revenue for commercial parking lots. So I've talked to our finance director, but it's basically a brand new tax revenue for commercial parking lots. That we're collecting 10% of income or a minimum of 10% of income with revenues dedicated to improving transportation alternatives versus driving alone travel. So with that, again, it's commercial parking or standalone parking lots that are rent parking on a daily, monthly, or annual basis. So we're creating a brand new title or section in Title III under Revenue and Finance. Commercial parking lot tax is what we'll call it, is going to be very similar to transit lodging tax that we've had to implement. So we're taking that as the basis of how we're processing this, or will be processing it, and it's going to be based on gross income. We're going to collect it quarterly, and we'll have a standardized form that's the owners of this commercial parking lot in the future, because we don't have any in Sherwood at this time, will have to execute and provide a check for us every quarter based on their gross income.
So the tax does go to the city.
Yes,
And then,
but we're gonna utilize it for alternatives to like active transportation.
The little city ODOT.
so the definition of commercial parking does not include storage parking.
No.
That's actually a good question.
Oh, let me find it out.
That's
Yeah,
a
because-
really-
I think Eric Langers and all those guys would like to know.
Okay, let me verify that with the state. Because we want to make sure it's clear in regards to who it is that we're gonna be taxing.
That's a great question.
Just clarify.
Because it does say, commercial, well, but it says commercial parking lots, standalone parking lots. I mean, I
What
think
he asked was the monthly or annual basis.
yeah, no, totally.
Okay,
You know, to me, it gets to, again, Portland-centric approach to this policy where they know that in downtown Portland, mainly for residents, again, it's mainly, well, it's serving employers as well, employees, but it's, you know, even on an annual basis, but you see monthly rate in this parking garage this
Mhm.
month, this much, annual rate this much. And so I think that's really what it's targeted towards, but I think it's a great question and I mean, this is the sort of the sausage making, if you will, of policy. It's like, hey, you gotta get in front of us and we got these questions and we gotta go back to the state and
Yeah.
be like, what do you guys mean here? You know, and so I think it's a great question.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I think because that would have more of an impact on businesses here. And so I think if that's the case, we would really,
We may change which. when
Yeah.
we choose that, if that is the case.
yeah, if it's gonna, and especially if there's a lot of residents that are now gonna be paying 10% more for storage, we need to talk about that.
yeah, so we'll get clarification from the state in regards to these, and this is great, that's why we have these work sessions so that we can work through that. So.
We have a chat question.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Storage, good point. Yeah, good point.
yeah,
Yeah, good point. Good point.
yeah, but we definitely, since we're drafting the code language, we'll have clarifying as far as
Oh, that's right.
what's exempt. And just to make sure that it's very clear in regards to who we're charging.
Yep, good.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, any other comments in regards to that new tax revenue? No, okay, let's move on. All right. So as far as outreach, we're gonna go in front of the chamber in one of their February luncheons. I don't know if we're gonna go to the first one, but probably the second, just so that we can prep for it. We're gonna have two public open houses, at least, one for the greater business community. And we're eyeing February 28th, the morning of. And then open house for the general public, and that's the day after. I really don't know if there's gonna be a lot of individuals, that would be interested in this. But we'll see. And we are gonna do our typical social media postings. And also we'll publish based on the land use hearing publication and notices. As far as engagement, other engagements that you guys can think of that we might have missed?
I like how you call it formerly Twitter, just to clarify.
Everyone does.
Well, I mean, that's how they say it versus X,
Formerly known as Twitter.
yeah,
This shows how successful that name change is.
right. Or even Threads. I've been invited to Threads, but I haven't. It must be a generational thing. I'm just saying. Okay, anyway, we're moving forward. All right, I did want to bring this back to you guys where one of the regulations we discussed previously was the line 1994, line 94, the transit corridor, frequent service transit corridor. So before we did the straight line of half a mile on each direction, I just wanted to let you know that we've modified it, where now it's a walking 30 minutes, half a mile. So it definitely shrunk the area, which is awesome. So yeah, thanks to Hugo, our associate planner, he was able to perform the walking distance analysis model.
It's gotta be a lot of work.
So
Yes, yeah.
this one's been a bit of a burr in my saddle for some reason.
It's like,
Yeah, because I like to be exact, I like to understand what's happening here. The definition of frequent transit service is 15 minutes or less. Not 15 minutes or more. And I know there's some other things there, but the fact that we keep calling it, we have to have an asterisk or something in this to say TriMet does not provide by definition of TriMet or by definition of Metro frequent transit services to Sherwood. And so I'm hung up on that point.
So I think they may be a little asterisk that says as defined by DLCD.
Not Metro.
Yeah, it's DLCD that define what frequent transit is.
And can you, and Joy, I don't know, off the top, did they give a time? We call it headway in the transit world. So headway is how often the buses come. Did they say, or the frequency?
I believe it was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 30 minutes.
So
Well, there was further in the ORS, in the OAR, excuse me, it does in 660-12-0440. Yeah, there's the corridor transit service of 15 minutes or less. It goes on to say the community does not have that at least once an hour in the community. And most of that OR, well, most of that OAR references cities and counties, cities and counties, cities and counties, and there's one line, community. And so I'm just curious on what's their definition of community on this, because by, in the first section, it's all cities and counties within the metro area, and then they go to community. So I don't know, are those subsections within a city, or is it a larger geographical area like Sherwood? So I know this whole point, it just bugs me. It bugs me that you could have definitions that meet your need by different government agencies, and I've got a big burr on this.
No, totally. I haven't read that in detail, but it sounds like what that was saying. So let's assume for a second that community means city or county, right? Let's assume that. It sounds like what that is saying is at least if we don't have a 15-minute headway, then a bus that's 1 hour is what it's saying?
Yeah.
And so is that how we got picked up on? Is this how this one got picked up?
Yeah, because I looked at our TriMet frequent transit.
Mhm.
And I go, oh, we're clear, we don't have any, because it was every,
Every 20 minutes and at the peak hours.
right, but I was corrected.
By DLCD, by the state.
Right, and saying, no, you guys do actually have it. And they said line 94 is considered frequent based on
Because
our
they can
definition.
define it however they want, pretty much.
For our
Was
definition.
it that line that they're referencing?
I don't know if it's that line, but let me
Yeah,
look.
let's clarify
Yeah,
that for you.
I'd push back a little just because then what's the point of having 15 minutes if a community is everything? That means anybody gets 1 hour service has to meet this.
Yeah, so, yeah, but, I've
Because
had,
everything's a city or a county, right? Any
Well,
place.
I'm thinking maybe they meant like within Portland, Multnomah Village, Brooklyn, those are smaller community. I thought maybe that's what they were meeting within a larger city, but it's just not defined. So I don't know what they mean.
and sometimes we get,
My hunch is that they're just, it was a common name reference to a city or county is my hunch, but we can look into it.
okay, we'll, look into it and get back to you on that.
But I'll just say, if there's room to push back within how they've written this law and it's supported by our city council, then we can look at those types of options.
This is exactly what I was referring to earlier with the Chevron doctrine thing. If it's ambiguous
Mhm.
and the state just defines it however, without that doctrine, you might have to go back to legislatures to say, be more specific with the law. And our representatives get to decide what it means.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a lot of implications potentially on that case for sure. Yeah.
My other concern with this, I don't know that we can handle it here, but then how if we can't require parking for new developments in here, and I realize it's probably pretty far in between, given it's mostly developed, but if it did, how do the people get around Sherwood? Then, if they can't have a car, then I think the idea is, well, there's transit, okay. But the transit goes in and out of Sherwood. It doesn't go around Sherwood. There's no bus line that can take them to the YMCA or something, right? So how do we, make sure that these people, if we can't require they have a parking space for a vehicle, can get around the town they live in?
So the good thing is, if there is a good thing, is that development, especially like in Portland, they've identified that people are still putting parking spaces, even though it's not required to meet their clients or the needs of
The
their.
market is driving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'm expecting that to also happen.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I mean.
May not.
Right, like the project that's gonna be coming in that is within this corridor is the Sherwood apartments. That you guys did a zone change, it's gonna be coming in ultimately, and it's within this whole area. They're apartments, so they are gonna be providing parking for their residents. We're providing, especially on our website, we're providing suggested parking. We're providing that, and it's of course the same as what we have in the code currently. I mean, we're providing all the resources that say you can provide these if you want, but of course, the state doesn't allow us to require them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is gonna be market driven in regards to if they are gonna provide it.
Heather.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sherwood Shuttle.
Sherwood Shuttle.
Yeah, no, funded by the state. Yeah. No, I think it's a good.
Is that a thing? Is that true? Does that exist?
No,
Is that funded by the state? Just
We use the
No, I
parking
mean,
tax to fund it.
the state does have funding for stuff. I mean, that's funding opportunity stuff. That's not actually, in all seriousness, it's not an uncommon proposal for communities that are either, can't afford or doesn't make sense to have an entire transit system, or just are
Or the-
really
yeah.
unique in that, small town and whatever, a lot of seniors or whatever it is. I mean, shuttles are not an uncommon proposal. I'm sure you've seen proposals in other
Or
communities.
that
for
last
shuttles.
mile bus system, it would be similar to that.
I don't mind saying it here. We just to be very transparent with you guys, we just had a applicant come in, and they had a land use approval. All this it's a really small property. I won't get into the exact property. I'm just gonna speak generally here and we can talk more about it, but it's a very small property. It's a drive-through property, basically like coffee, drinks, stuff like that. Standalone, not in a commercial center, and they had a staff decision to provide 4 parking stalls. So that was the minimum in the code prior to CFAC, and so staff conditioned them to provide 4 parking stalls. What happened in that decision was they couldn't provide all of the parking on the site because it was so small, and so we conditioned them per the code to provide evidence of a shared parking agreement with a neighbor, which is permitted under the code. What happened is because of CFAC, they came in and modified their application and removed all the parking. And they will have no parking on their site. It'll basically just be a drive-through. I think and so I just want to give you an example of how CFAC is actually playing out. And there are owners that are taking advantage of it right now in properties. And I think in this specific situation, it's not going to be a problem for the customer. This is basically a drive-through, right? The business is not there's no sit down in this drive-through place. It's a drive-through, right?
Employees.
Bingo. And so I'll just say behind the scenes, staff was very clear with this owner and this applicant that they can't park, and there's no parking on the street here, that if they start parking on the street, city's gonna enforce it quickly. And, we hope we don't get any complaints from neighbors about employees parking on adjacent properties. That's, to be honest, that's not our issue to enforce. But I think it's a concern that I have that, there may be sent out to scare everybody, but there could be bad actors and there's probably gonna be some good outcomes of right sizing parking, but. I have a concern that now another private party is gonna have to get into it with a neighbor who opted to have no parking. I have that concern. How much the city actually gets involved, I'm not sure, but,
Bring jobs to Sherwood, but you can't work there because you can't get there.
or, I
Parking wars.
I think I've said this, generally speaking, we do provide more parking than is needed. I'll just say that in a lot of cases we do, but this is not to get into the politics, but it's almost like a really big response. So I just want to acknowledge that there might be some good outcomes of this in terms of lowering development costs, things like that, but there are other outcomes as well. And I think it's TBD how all of this actually turns out. But I think for projects like Joy just mentioned, for these sort of newer, larger developments, especially for residential, the developer is not going to want to have an untenable situation for their tenants and leases and all that sort of stuff. So we hope that the market that addresses it, but I'll just say there's been a recent example of parking. And it's a very small property, but I'm certain we're gonna get complaints sooner or later on the thing, so.
Whoever that owner or property is, they're gonna be upset when they can't hire someone.
Well, I think that was my other point was, we're in climate, not to get into politics, I'll just say this, is that now I do have a concern about pedestrian safety.
Well, that and yeah, I was thinking, or, they'll be like, well, no one wants to work for this amount. It's like, well, they're having to incur other costs due to no parking and you're not wanting to cover for that, so.
Yeah.
It's gonna.
You missed the actual resolution. They put a helicopter landing pad on top. That's what they did, right?
That's what they're coming in every day.
All right, okay.
My only mitigant, I had just one kind of idea about maybe we require, okay, if you're not gonna have parking, there needs to be a parking structure, some off-site thing within a quarter mile or 2,000 square feet of your development, or 2,000 square feet, 2,000 feet. That has adequate parking that's unclaimed. I don't know how we look at that or think about that, but.
Because
If you're gonna develop and not have any parking, it has to be within this distance of some off-site parking facility.
Which does make us ensure.
Which doesn't exist, which means they'll build parking, how about that?
Exactly.
Can you say that, so in terms of is it an idea, I'm sorry, I kind of missed the first part of that.
Oh, I was just thinking, is there some way we can say, that if you, I don't even know how to quite phrase this, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But some new developments must be within, 2,000 feet or quarter mile of what we would consider adequate off-street parking that is.
If it's subject to this,
Yeah, somehow, any new development just needs to be within a quarter mile of.
I think we would leave ourselves, we leave.
Parking facility that is adequate or something like that.
I like
I'm grasping.
I like the creativeness. I think we'd leave ourselves open to an appeal there for sure.
That's required parking.
That's
Yeah.
required.
Still requiring parking.
Yes. Yeah, because we have, reducing parking, we have that section where you can reduce. And before it was with commercial, institutional and public and industrial zone, shared parking may be provided on lots that are within, before it was 500 feet. Now it's within 2,000 feet. So they've even expanded it where they.
Was that a state requirement?
Yeah, that is a shared.
And the difference here would be the developer isn't necessarily required to have parking, so that would comply with it, but if they
Yeah.
argue that it, that essentially does, then that's,
Yes.
I get it.
Is there anything that says, I'm sure that there is, but if you do not provide parking, then you must provide housing on site for your employee.
No. right.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, let's look at the chat here, yeah, replacement, oh, let's see. What was that?
Click on jump to the latest.
Oh, so now.
Yeah, he's, it's basically a grant program for, shuttle service.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
thank you. We can take a look at it.
yeah,
We're always looking for bringing money to Sherwood to improve everything, so good
okay,
recommendation.
yeah. Any other comments in regards to this?
I think I'd be happy if we just took away the word frequent. Cause that's, but they're not redefining, I read it, so they're not redefining what frequent service is. They're saying if you don't have this, but you're in a community that has at least 1 hour, you still have to do it.
Yeah, we can just update that to say
Okay.
walkable from line 94,
That's why I did
Okay,
just so it's not misleading, right?
less
okay,
than frequent, put just a little less than symbol in there, we'll be fine. Less than frequent.
But everyone, and then everyone will be like, is that less than or greater than?
okay, we're gonna just remove the word frequent, okay.
Sorry, I just, it's,
No, that's okay. No, I'm loving it. All right. Let's move. And I think I'm past my 30 minutes.
Go
but
ahead,
That's
go
okay. Sorry, Eric.
Yeah.
Under new management.
come on, Joey.
I'm just kidding. I'm teasing you.
Like that.
All right, just a couple of wordsmithing for clarity that you guys provided, like I had a typo that says on versus one, you know, and shall versus should, or should versus shall. But there was one question where there is a conversion of existing parking lots. You guys were asking, you know, who determines if it's underutilized? Do we require a market study? And DLCD basically said no. The owner would basically says, my parking lot is underutilized and I want to redevelop it. And that is good enough.
So what's the definition of underutilized?
That's what.
There
they
is
did
not
determine.
anything at all.
Yeah, it's the
long as it's still
landowner
getting
would say it's underutilized and I want to redevelop
As long
it.
as they still hit it on the parking.
Is there an approval process for that, Joe?
Is there a new minimum?
It just says that it allows for it. So it would be, let's just say Walmart decides to have another pad, they would go through the typical site plan review. It just allows them to redevelop the site.
So is this still areas that are walkable to line 94?
No, this is just underutilized parking, commercial parking spaces.
But
Because,
the end result still has to meet whatever minimum parking standards we have.
right,
So
Okay.
right. Yeah, but
if they
Unless
exist.
it's on that line.
If they,
unless if it's in that line where we don't require parking at all. Yeah,
if they
but,
apply, yeah, and I'll just say,
We're not required for this, the state not required for
yeah.
right,
And in my comment, you know, we're getting a lot of interpretations from DLCD and I think the good thing is there's always going to be a more formal process, like let's say a developer or property owner wanted to take advantage of that. They're probably going to have to go through some other process with us to get a, you know, site plan approval, a subdivision, whatever it is. And so if there's a concern that we have as a city in the informal, if you will, interpretation from DLCD, we could have our own interpretation of that. And, you know, potentially it would be up to that applicant to take it up to LUBA or some other place and actually get a formal interpretation, right? And so, you know, I think we want to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt in terms of these really informal conversations with DLCD on interpretation.
So I just wanted to highlight that we do have a CFAC webpage, so this is the link and we have the FAQ. We've updated the frequent, oh, no, not frequent.
Less than frequent.
The transit corridor map and provided also the recommended parking standards. Yeah, and as far as next steps, you know, we're gonna continue in regards to tracking the requirements because sometimes they provide updates. So I'm just continuing looking at that. I will start finalizing, I started drafting, but finalizing the Title III. The new revenue as far as for the parking lot, local tax. So everyone knows there is no commercial parking lot in Sherwood at this time. We are just establishing it, so if and when it ever comes, we'll be ready for it. And then, as you're aware, we're in CFAC litigation and there's no update on that. So we don't really have an idea as far as, Eric, do you have any idea? Okay,
What is the timeline?
Yeah.
What's the next hearing and stuff?
So it was, I think, Ryan Adams mentioned this, but it was like expedited, if you will, by the appellate court. And so
It's 1 year instead of 5.
they're gonna make a decision sooner than other decisions. And last I heard, from Ryan, he thought it could be early this year. He thought it could be. And then the question is, of course, does it get appealed to the Oregon Supreme Court?
share,
And-
sorry.
When do we need to have this in place for sure? What's our June 3rd?
I think it's June 30th. So there's kind of rolling, it's actually a pretty big package. Some of the stuff we haven't really even gotten into with you guys, sorry to tell you that, but right now we're working on the parking reform and the code updates, but there are changes to our TSP that we need to make. There's changes to, I don't know if we're gonna have to do this, but because we're in the metro, but changes to our land use program potentially as part of it as well. And so, I mean, and the timeline on this is like 2029 to update our TSP, for example. And so this is a long, multi-year project. There's more coming. And so the litigation getting resolved is actually gonna be earlier in the big picture of things.
Right, but as far as the CFAC work itself, it has to be in place by June 30th.
This work, yes.
Yes, so the hearings that we would be considering are in early March. You guys will probably start seeing them in March. So then,
Public hearings related to it, you mean?
yeah,
Like applicants are coming in and they want things.
no.
No.
Hearings for the amendments,
Amendments, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
right, because then council probably in April, so then or in May, because it has to be 30 days in effect.
Okay,
So there's, yeah, it's just moving forward.
okay.
Yeah, and that's all that I had in regards to CFAC.
Are you wanting to look at some of your code revisions?
Sure, yeah, if
You guys have edits.
or
Comments or edits.
or Dan, you can also just send them to me.
What do you prefer? You wanna tell us
Yeah.
now? If they're quick, tell us.
Well, I had a couple of questions, I think.
Okay,
Page 16, this electric vehicle one, I'm actually, when it says 40% of spaces need to be electric vehicle spaces,
yeah,
does that mean they're exclusive to electric vehicles?
well,
Can any car park in those spaces? I'm just, maybe over the.
so the odd part is that the 40% is just the conduits.
Yeah.
So
Not even.
it's not even the charging
Oh.
station, they just have to have the conduits in place.
I see.
Yeah,
The biggest cost of installing, so if they find a need with their tenants to install it,
Oh.
the biggest cost of the construction is installing the conduit.
Oh, got it.
They
Okay.
don't have to tear up the parking lot in
Yeah,
the future.
they pull the electrical cable, install the charger, and
yeah,
they're up and running.
Okay, okay. On page 20, number 3. The parking reduction is allowed at development, blah, blah, blah. I think this is elsewhere in code where it's just more clearly defined, but what does that mean? Like, parking reduction from what to what?
okay, so
Yeah,
tell me, packet page.
How packet page 20, very top, number 3.
Oh, I was looking down here.
No, yeah, the blue stuff. Which I was trying to go back and see where the context, and it rolls back up the prior page, see just options for reducing required parking spaces. Number 3, parking reduction is allowed at the development. That provides solar power, blah, 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 but none of that's defined, like how much they need to provide, how much reduction do they get. Now, I did see that elsewhere in your packet, more outlined. I just don't know if it matters that it isn't defined here. I think that was my main
Okay,
thought.
that's, Yeah, because it's a requirement, in regards to how you can reduce parking and if the developer provides solar. That's another option, that
Yeah.
avenue, but as far as better definition, okay.
Yeah, I mean, is it down to 0? Is it 20%? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that gets talked about.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
maybe even on the next page, like number 4 on the next page, but it's a different section. It's instead of, I mean, I don't have the entire code to see how the whole thing flows and reads together, but. you know,
Okay,
just-
yeah, and it might not even be defined by the state.
Well, yeah,
And then like it was just a
Worse.
standard that they just said, well, if
Right.
they provide this, they can reduce the.
I figured
parking.
you're probably just copying because we're trying to do minimums, exactly what they have, but there are some things that are a little ambiguous that make
Yeah.
me somewhat concerned.
Okay,
Yeah. Which, side note, not for tonight, but I'm wondering if we should consider design standards for like windmills and these other things that we're allowing to be put in properties.
And windmills by power generation.
Yeah, whatever these things.
Residential.
Yeah, when they install wind power capacity, whatever that means, maybe we get to define a little bit, sure, you put them in, but they need to look like this, or, you know, whatever, yeah. Just a thought, side note.
I mean, our code right now, I think it says mechanical equipment has to be screened from the right of way. Wind turbines are tough because they're gonna be, they're gonna be on the roof, but.
For example, I think it was Tualatin Road, the,
Street.
Yeah, those are tasteful.
Yeah, they
I
are.
just don't know if this kind of restricts to that, like, that'd be okay, I'm just wanting to make sure that
okay.
he just plants a, like Iowa, like it's Iowa, or a little farm, you know, I doubt it, but.
Okay.
Just trying to get ahead of things. Let's see, I think that was pretty close. Street width, design, yeah. I kind of had a general, like, I'm a little bit worried, because I couldn't see, so if you go to packet page, and I gotta find it. Packet page 5. Have you implemented or otherwise put anything in about number 3 here on packet page 5? All these property types, development types that don't have any parking standards at all, is that implemented yet or put in?
We,
Okay.
we were already.
already in there.
Yeah, like,
Do we have safe harbor from the state or lawsuits for this? Like the one that really concerns, because they've pretty much singled out all the marginalized communities that they don't have you get parking. But the one that really bothers me is disabled people. Like there's a reason that we prioritize parking spaces for handicapped and to just remove them completely. I don't know if that's a problem for us or if the state protects us from suits from under ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. Just another.
To not have parking available for them even.
Yes, because
It's a great question.
that is a federal act that we.
I think that's a question for DLCD. I mean, behind background with our city attorney, but I think that's a good question to direct to DLCD staff and see what they say.
Yeah, again, just. About that.
So the code right now says basically if it's a, what does it say? If it's a
boarding house, daycare.
nursing home, then no parking would be required. So
A in particular, with
Yeah.
people with physical and intellectual developmental disabilities, all this disabled people, which the ADA exists to protect. And that's why we have handicap spaces that are front and center.
the question would be from
Don't have any parking at all.
a lawsuit for compliance with ADA laws.
Yes, yeah, because we allowed a development to go in that had no ADA compliance.
Yeah.
but we're not. We aren't saying you can't put the parking there. We're saying it's up to the builder. We're not gonna mandate it.
That's true.
So that the laws would fall on the
But is
builder.
the city liable for not even requiring minimum standards required by federal law? I think that's my concern.
I think it's a really good question we can ask. Yeah. And yeah, that's a good question.
And then I think my last one was on, I mean, I have more, but we can go through other things. The last one just more technical. On the very first thing you presented today, Joy, the lead commercial uses. On the very last packet page 34.
Okay.
Number 1 and number 4 seem to conflict, but maybe I'm just reading it wrong. So it says, unless commercial use is listed as exempt, subsection this, off-street parking accessory to rented or leased commercial use spaces shall not be included in any new rental or lease agreement. So not in the lease agreement. Number 4 says unbundled parking shall be listed as a separate line item in a commercial lease agreement.
Well, so it says it continues, so it shall not be included in any new, and shall be subject to a separate rental or lease agreement.
Okay, but then number 4 says, but it shall be as a separate line item on a commercial lease agreement.
Oh, I see, okay.
Well, and I don't know, maybe I'm just reading it wrong. Maybe it's like,
So one is just saying that it's a,
see, I read this as, well, in one case, we're saying you need 2 separate agreements. And in the other case, we're saying we're actually going to put unbundled parking as a line item within your existing commercial lease agreement.
I see.
That, maybe I'm reading it wrong. Maybe it's not that way. And I just didn't think about it clearly. I just want to make sure it's.
I think the way I'm reading it is the pricing cannot be included in the rent or lease.
Right.
It has to be a separate line item, which is pretty much what 4 specifies out.
I see.
That's how I'm reading it.
I see.
So there's probably room for clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, we can clarify that. We can, does the state actually say that it, I know we followed the state language. It probably says something about not being included in the lease or included separately or whatever it is. So we-
Yeah, and this is also, you know, they provided examples from other jurisdictions that, you know, and some of this language may have been borrowed, but we'll definitely clarify.
Yeah, we'll
Because if
clarify.
you had a question about it, not really correct. Okay,
Yep. And sorry, I just thought of another one, but number 2, exemption includes these things. Those, I was just thinking, is there anything else that would be exempt, but this is state standards? And I said like recreational, those are not, but those are not part of these standards, are they? Recreational uses and stuff. Like what else would be exempt from this unbundled parking that?
Storage yards.
Storage yards, yeah. I mean, I can see why, because I've looked at it, I can see why hotels and motels and truck yards and stuff, but what about like our ice arena? You know, I don't know if that's
Skate park.
escape, you know, it seems like there's these other things, but maybe we don't have a choice because this is state language, I don't know.
Oh, industrial property or,
well, this is
Not
definitely for
industrial.
commercial uses.
Commercial use.
only
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah, commercial
Yeah.
uses, so
That's
we
why I
started
asked
looking,
if it's
we were looking at all the commercial uses table. In regards to, okay,
Okay.
which ones should we, you know, are applicable?
what was was there an impetus for this or was it? Why did we exclude these? What was the logic, I guess?
This was like, example language that was
Example.
provided.
So we can't add to it even if we thought another one.
No, we
qualified.
can.
Oh, we
No,
can.
can.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting at,
We
like,
can.
what
What's the
is,
criteria to put?
what's the criteria? Is it?
So, okay, so hotels and motels, right? If
Yeah.
people are just,
Well, usually it's an owner operator. Because this is not a separate, it's not like there's an
Yeah, it's
owner
not
and
like-
they're leasing to a hotel and they have to unbundle parking. Usually
Right.
it's all one big owner
and
operator.
usually I get charged for bringing the car in and having to park in their garage.
This is just exempting from having to have 2 different contracts for parking, whatever. I'm just thinking where else does that make sense under commercial uses? If we're allowed to exempt certain folks.
So recreation was the other,
I mean, to me, it seems like the bottom 2 are where parking vehicle servicing or storing of vehicles is like the essential business is the bottom 2. And we do actually have a code section that is like auto-oriented uses. And so it's like car washes and, you know, anything, gas stations, all that sort of stuff. The hotels and motels is confusing to me, but they had it in the, because to me, it's like, hey, if we're trying to reduce VMTs,
but typically
take
they,
transit. to
yeah,
your
but the
hotel.
hotel motel is owned typically by one.
Yeah, which makes you think maybe owner operated businesses generally.
So,
I don't know.
We can look into it more.
yeah, and the question about, how about the Sherwood Arts Center?
Yeah.
Right?
Public,
I just don't know if that's commercial. Yeah.
it's institutional, so I think would probably be.
That's why that's
Yeah.
the recreational part. I couldn't remember what all was in commercial.
Okay, well,
Owner operated seems right, other than the structure of owner operated gets tricky, because a lot of times an owner will own the development under an LLC and then lease it to their own company or something. So there could be weirdness there, but I think generally owner operated is. Makes sense.
And they wouldn't be subject to it anyways, because then they don't have a lease, right?
Sometimes.
Unless they did what you just mentioned,
Yeah.
and then they charge
Right.
themselves for parking, I guess,
They
but
usually charge whatever pass through they need for tax purposes in their LLC or whatever.
We can look into this more, but to me, that the bottom two have a common criteria, if you will. I'm not sure about A, there might be a unique reason for that one, but I mean, hey, if we have other things that go along with this group that actually makes sense, then I think we can add them. So we can
Yeah.
look at that.
So, and the YMCA, that's public at this time, right?
Also institutional,
Yeah.
yeah, public institutional.
But that's good, Tyler. That's what I was trying to think of. Things that could be affected by this, yeah.
No, it's, you know, and again, I think we have tried to, and this is really just really interesting to me, you know, sort of picking at and identifying what the impacts are gonna be. And again, we tried to go with the least impactful. The easiest in terms of process would have been to remove all parking standards, right? And then we don't even have this meeting for the most part. It's just, there's just no standards.
Yeah,
But we're getting into the weeds. We're getting into the weeds a little bit to try and craft something that is actually the least impactful until we get to the litigation, so.
yep,
Well, thank you for your guys' work on this. I know it's a ton of work to do this.
Yeah.
Well, even just, especially just that map of the.
You did a good job on that. He's been.
Yes.
Well, Joy, I'm sure, I know this is a lot of work to do going through all this, you know. But I'm just thinking about that map, all these unique lots that you have to like count the
Yeah,
steps.
section analysis, GIS. Are there any?
Dan, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Dan, do you have any updates that you want to share?
We haven't really had much on our agendas actually for the last few council meetings. So there isn't really anything of note. We talked about the annual housing report. Yeah, the pedestrian bridge got approved contract. Yeah, I don't know if there's, we're age-friendly city now.
ADRP?
What?
right,
Age-friendly
Age friendly, what does that mean?
for the elderly, what does that mean?
According to somebody?
What's the
definition of elderly?
AARP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's a designation, we met the criteria and.
16 and above, if it's AARP.
it's 50, well, yes, I am a member.
Me too, me too.
Any commissioner updates? All right, I
Alright.
think it'll be a little bit busier in the coming months than it has been. Fair warning, we'll have some, maybe Sherwood West, some more CFAC updates, potentially some land use hearings coming up. So nothing like it was 2 years ago, but it'll pick up a little bit, this late, winter and spring.
So, well, I don't know if everybody's aware, we have a temporary or a interim.
City manager,
and we
yeah.
have an Assistant city manager now, public works director, Craig Sheldon was offered that position for the interim right now.
Yeah, and then I think just, do you want to give the update on postponing the recruitment for?
Yeah, so we are waiting until after the budgeting cycle to revisit looking for someone to fill that position. And so Greg is gonna stay in that for the next until probably July, we'll revisit it.
Do you know, well, why would you wait till after the budget? Just to understand.
Yeah, that's a great
where-
question.
Yeah.
And the consensus from the majority of council decided that it was best to wait so that the incoming, if we were to find somebody, they wouldn't be coming in during the budgeting process.
Mm-hmm. There's pros and cons to that. I'm sure there was discussion.
There was plenty of
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, anything else? All right, I'll move that we adjourn.
Thanks, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Barnes.